Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to talk about rings. Ancient Egypt, 3100 BC, the earliest record of rings, goes back to ancient Egypt. It was during the first dynasty when rings were used as seals. These early Egyptians made their rings from precious metals such as gold and silver, and they decorated them with precious stones like lapis lazuli and carnelian. They also liked to engrave symbols onto the stones. Ancient Mesopotamia, 2000 BC. At the dawn of civilization in Mesopotamia, rings were a sign of wealth and power. Wedding bands were common, and men wore signet rings on their index fingers to seal letters. During the time of Hammurabi, rings were still popular, but were now also being used as weapons. The Assyrians and Babylonians made rings out of iron and other hard metals. They also used them to hold amulets and talismans that were believed to protect the wearer from evil spirits. Ancient Greece, 800 BC. Rings became more popular in ancient Greece. They were worn by both men and women and were made from precious metals such as gold and silver. They were often engraved with scenes from Greek mythology or with geometric patterns. Rings were used as gifts, as a symbol of wealth and power, and were also used in religious ceremonies. The Greeks were also known for their use of gemstones in their jewelry, and they used a variety of precious and semi-precious stones in their rings. Ancient Rome, 509 BC. In ancient Rome, rings were worn by both men and women. They were usually made of gold and silver and were often set with precious stones. Roman rings were typically more elaborate than Greek rings and were more likely to feature scenes from Roman history or mythology. They were also used as a symbol of wealth and power, but they were also used as a symbol of love and friendship. Roman women wore rings on their fingers, on their toes, and even on their noses. During the time of the Roman Empire, there was a trend towards more minimalist rings. These were often made of gold and were engraved with simple designs such as the emperor's profile. Early Christianity, 33 AD, early Christians did not wear rings, believing that jewelry was a symbol of wealth and worldly possessions. This was seen as incompatible with the teachings of Jesus Christ, called for his followers to renounce their worldly possessions and to live a life of simplicity. However, after the legalization of Christianity in the Roman Empire, Christians began to wear rings again. Viking Age, 793 AD. During the Viking Age, rings were worn by both men and women, were often made of silver, and were decorated with Norse runes or other symbols from Norse mythology. Viking rings were typically more simple than the rings of other cultures, but they were often very high quality, were typically made by local artisans, and were often passed down through the family. The Vikings also traded with other cultures, including the Byzantines and the Arabs, and they acquired rings from these cultures as well. Medieval Europe, for 76 AD, during the Middle Ages, rings were worn by both men and women. They were often made of gold and were set with precious stones. Rings were used as a symbol of wealth and power, but they were also used as a symbol of love and commitment. Wedding bands were also popular during this time period. During the Victorian era, rings became more elaborate and were often used to display one's wealth and status. They were also used as a symbol of mourning, with black rings being worn by those who had recently lost a loved one. Renaissance, 14th century. During the Renaissance, rings were worn by both men and women. They were often made of gold and were engraved with scenes from classical mythology or with portraits of important figures. Rings were used as a symbol of wealth and power, but they were also used as a symbol of love and friendship. Age of Enlightenment, 18th century. During the Age of Enlightenment, rings were worn by both men and women. They were often made of gold and were engraved with scenes from classical antiquity or with portraits of important figures. Rings were used as a symbol of wealth and power, but they were also used as a symbol of love and friendship. During the French Revolution, the wearing of rings by the aristocracy was seen as a symbol of the extravagance and excess of the ancien regime, and therefore fell out of favor. However, they remained popular among the middle classes. 19th century. During the 19th century, rings were worn by both men and women. They were often made of gold and were set with precious stones. Rings were used as a symbol of wealth and power, but they were also used as a symbol of love and commitment. The Victorian era saw a renewed interest in jewelry, and rings were often given as a symbol of love and affection. 20th century. In the 20th century, rings continued to be popular. They were worn by both men and women, and were often made of a variety of materials, including gold, silver, platinum, and titanium. Men's rings were often simpler than women's rings, but they were also worn as a symbol of power and masculinity. Women's rings were often more elaborate and were worn to accentuate one's femininity. They were also worn to show off one's wealth and status. During the mid-20th century, there was a trend towards more minimalist rings. These were often made of silver or gold and were engraved with simple designs. Now let's talk about different types of rings. Signet ring is a ring with a design engraved into it. Signet rings are usually made of precious metals such as gold or silver and are often used as a seal to stamp wax or clay. They were popular in the Middle Ages and are still worn today as a symbol of wealth and power. A cocktail ring is a large, showy ring that is meant to be worn with formal attire. They are usually made of precious metals and are set with large gemstones. They were popular in the 1920s and 1930s and are making a comeback today. An engagement ring is a ring that is worn on the left ring finger and symbolizes commitment and love. They are usually made of precious metals and are set with diamonds or other precious stones. A wedding band is a ring that is worn on the left ring finger and symbolizes the bond between husband and wife. They are usually made of precious metals such as gold or platinum. A pinky ring is a ring that is worn on the pinky finger and is often used as a symbol of power or wealth. They were popular in the 1980s and 1990s and are making a comeback today. An eternity ring is a ring that is made of precious metals and is set with diamonds or other precious stones around the entire circumference of the ring. They symbolize everlasting love and commitment. A knuckle ring is a ring that covers the top of the finger and is often made of precious metals. They are a symbol of wealth and power. Some famous people who have worn iconic rings include King Solomon, who is said to have worn the Ring of Solomon, which gave him powers over the supernatural. Napoleon Bonaparte, who is said to have worn the Ring of the Sun, which symbolized his power and authority. Queen Elizabeth I, who wore the Ring of Power, which symbolized her royal authority. John Lennon, who wore the Ring of Peace, which symbolized his commitment to peace and love. And Lady Gaga, who is known for her outlandish and often oversized rings. So that's a look at rings through history. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything else you'd like to know about rings. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.